Hi, friends. Just a reminder, if you haven't heard it on our previous episodes, but we created a 7-day Brighter Challenge. It's a self-love reset, which we love resets, to really help you gently reconnect with yourself, especially because February is the season of love, and we definitely want to love ourselves first and foremost. In order to get our 7-day challenge, you want to sign up for our newsletter and you get a free download. Start your reset with us.
Just head to chasingbrighter.com/newsletter for details and to subscribe.
Welcome back to Chasing Brighter, the podcast created as a guide to living brighter and a more connected and real life, because real is the new perfect.
And as you know, in February, we are all about resetting, resting, and reconnecting. And today we're exploring rest and giving you permission to rest without guilt.
Let's be honest here. Rest sounds amazing, but when you do it, you feel very uncomfortable. I do, at least.
Yeah, I think especially for women, and especially in a culture that equates worth with productivity. You know, for many women, rest isn't just physically hard, it's emotionally complicated. Many of us learned explicitly or implicitly that resting is lazy, selfish, or irresponsible. From a young age, we're often praised for being helpful, capable, reliable, and selfless. We learn subtly and overtly that being good means being useful, accommodating, and productive. I know I've talked before about that idea of being a good girl and what that means, especially us Gen Xers and Millennials. And over time, that message can turn into an internal role. If I'm not doing something, I'm falling behind.
I'm really excited to talk about this because I want to know how to navigate this.
Yeah.
So add to that the mental load all of us women carry, managing a household, balancing careers, emotions, schedules, relationships, expectations. Rest really can start to feel undeserved because we feel like we have to do so many things. And
Yeah.
even when our bodies are tired, our minds tell us, you haven't earned a break yet. There's often this guilt layered in. Guilt for stopping, guilt for saying no, guilt for choosing ourselves.
Yeah, and in a culture that celebrates hustle, busyness, and constant output, it can feel like a rebellion. I know a lot of people say, I'll rest when I'm dead, or
Yeah.
famous and leaders have said, oh, I average 4 hours of sleep a night, and productivity is rewarded and stillness is questioned. So slowing down can trigger anxiety for a lot of us, not because rest is wrong, but because we've been conditioned to associate our value with what we produce, not who we are. I know this is something I've been working on for the last couple of years, and this had been a struggle for me, but I'm so much better with this idea.
I think that's where, how do we kind of think about it as the reality of it, which is the truth is that rest isn't laziness. It's not quitting and it's not weakness. Rest is a biological need. It's an emotional reset. It's a way to regulate the nervous system, which we love to regulate, and we try real hard here at Chasing Brighter. And it's also a way to reconnect with ourselves.
Yeah. Letting go of guilt around rest often means that we have to unlearn deeply rooted beliefs and begin replacing them with a gentler truth that your worth is not measured by how much you do. You are worthy of rest simply because you are human. I say this all the time to my clients. You are worthy because you are here. You are worthy, the end. You do not earn worthiness. You just are worthy.
And I think that's great, Jess, because, I really think that's why choosing rest feels uncomfortable at first, but really can be very powerful. Because rest is so complicated for us that when we stop to rest, nervous system doesn't relax and it panics.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of get to that moment.
And I think the panic often sounds like, if I slow down, everything will fall apart.
And the truth is, it's the system and not you that's the problem. I think about this too. I read I got a newsletter about the inverse theory about stuff. So it's like, even thinking about if I did rest, what would happen versus if I didn't rest, and kind of taking
Yeah.
yourself down that path, right? Because you realize
Yeah.
that things are going to happen whether you rest or not. So taking care of yourself should be,
Well,
a
but
priority.
if everything falls apart because you took a break, right?
Yeah,
You're not the problem. The system is the problem. So if
that's
you
right.
are the one that is the engine and the motor and the driving force in your life doing everything, yes, the system will fall apart because it's dysfunctional in the first place, right? So then I think rest exposes unsustainable patterns. So it doesn't create the patterns. It exposes some things that you might have set up where you need to take some things off your plate, delegate some tasks to other people so that you have a built-in rest in your system. So today we've identified 4 types of rest: mental, emotional, sensory, and creative.
Yeah, I love this too because we think about, we decided we were going to talk about this topic. I think about rest as like a nap, right?
Mm-hmm.
But rest is different things. Let's talk about what rest is. And also sometimes just being aware that this is what I'm counting as my rest kind of a thing makes you
Yeah.
realize like, oh, wait, this is helping me. This is rebuilding. So rest sometimes looks like doing less. It's about doing something that is nourishing. First, let's talk about mental rest. So, mental rest is about making fewer decisions. It's giving your brain a break from the constant problem solving, planning, and decision making. So, what mental overload looks like, and I know we all feel it, is feeling foggy and irritable. It's replaying conversations in our heads, which I hate when that happens. It's constantly thinking about what's next. It's decision fatigue by like late morning and midday when you've had to do all this stuff and you're just tired of making decisions.
Yeah.
And so, what does rest look like? What is the inverse of that? What does mental rest look like? So maybe that's eating a simple breakfast or lunch a few days in a row. And maybe that's what I do sometimes is like quiet in a quiet moment. Because sometimes we always have our TV on, there's always a TV going, but like having those quiet moments or just eating a simple meal a few days in a row.
Yeah, if you take some time to make to take away decision fatigue, it's like let's say you make 3 servings of oatmeal. So then every day you take away that one decision that you start your day with by knowing I already have this for the next 3 days. I don't have to use my brain anymore, right? I like the idea too of like letting someone else choose the movie, the restaurant, the plan. Like don't
Yeah.
just automatically take over things. Just let someone else make those decisions.
Maybe it's even writing or journaling a brain dump just to get all those thoughts out of your head so they're not adding to that load, sort of offload them, if you will.
Yeah.
Maybe it's creating just sort of default routines. Again, this goes back to, I feel like, Atomic Habits, where it was all about this idea of creating everything as a routine and a ritual. And by doing that, it sort of lessens your mental load. So you're doing the same workout, you're doing the same grocery list. You're kind of keep building in a ritual that doesn't take a lot of decision making.
Yeah. Maybe even saying, I'll decide tomorrow. If the decision isn't urgent, and just put it off for the next day.
I love this one, Jess, by the way, because just as a quick example for myself is I tend to, something pops in my head and I'm like, I got to do it. I got to do it, especially with the kids. You got to do this kid. You got to do that kid. And I've been stopping myself and just being like, you know what? I'm not going to talk to them about it tonight. I'm going to bring it up tomorrow and just like see if it's still important. Because I think that's the other part, right? Is if it doesn't pop up again, it wasn't really that important. And so don't give yourself that like added load.
Yeah. Yeah. And reframe it that mental rest is not being careless. It's conserving energy. And that brings us to emotional rest. I love the idea of thinking about like not explaining yourself, right? So emotional rest is about being in spaces where you don't have to perform, justify, or manage other people's emotions. So what emotional exhaustion might look like for some of us: over explaining your choices. I used to do that all the time. People pleasing or tone monitoring. Feeling responsible for how others feel. Holding things in because it just feels easier. So let's shift that. So then if that resonated with you, This is what emotional rest might look like for you. Saying no without adding a reason. I train my clients on all the time and my kids. You can just say that doesn't work for me. You don't have to say, oh, my husband's working late and then I got to get the kids from school, blah, 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 blah. Say that won't work for me.
I have a hard time with that one, but I also notice the more you do it, the more people you realize like you get comfortable with just saying no and you
Yeah,
don't
no
feel
one
like you have
cares.
to have it.
And I
No.
always say, if the person says why, blah, 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 that's a great indicator of like that person does not respect boundaries and maybe we don't need them in our lives.
Also, maybe it is spending time being around people. Again, just thinking about people you spend time with, but it's people who, don't require you to be on all the time.
Yeah.
Not a lot
Yeah.
of effort. Maybe it's letting yourself feel the feels, feel sad, feel quiet, feel unsure about, you don't have to fix everything in a given situation.
Yeah. And just journaling honestly without editing yourself. Like you kind of said, brain dumping, just write it all out, not
Mm-hmm.
editing, thinking it has to look or sound a certain way.
Yeah. And, finally, it's about choosing not to engage in situations that feel draining or charged. And this is really, something Jess and I have been talking a lot about just in our own personal interactions, especially with family and things. But this is where, it don't engage, like if there are things that you find that are going to be emotionally draining, um, step away, don't respond. I'm finding that I just kind of like change the subject about
Yeah.
something if I'm in a topic that I don't really want to get, if it starts getting charged, to sort of redirect, if you will. So, emotional rest is not about withdrawal. It's not about removing yourself from things and about pulling back. And the whole idea of it, you want to reframe that because it's about self-protection.
And now we move on to something I know, Kelly, you alluded to earlier that I know you're sensitive to, right? Sensory things, right? So we look at sensory rest, less noise, less input. So sensory rest helps calm a nervous system that's been overstimulated by screens, noise, lights, and constant information. I think for me, the mental load, and I used to have emotional like pull, being so sensitive, thinking I had to control the emotions of the room. So sensory rest isn't like super on my top priority, but like you had said, Kelly, immediately when you think of rest, you go to quiet, right? So
Yeah.
for some of us, if we don't know, am I overloaded? Are my senses overloaded? That might look like for you feeling jumpy or easily overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
headaches or tension.
And maybe it's needing to be quiet, but not knowing how to ask for it. Or maybe you're feeling exhausted after being on all day. And that sometimes I definitely feel that as well. And I think part of it too, for me with sensory overload, and I don't know if others feel this, is sometimes I feel this way or like overstimulated. Any of this is driven if I have like a lot of coffee or other things that sort of make me more jumpy and jittery, that all of this sort of like hits differently too. So let's talk about sensory rest and what that might look like. So I know I talked about it before and I kind of jumped the gun when we talk about kind of mental rest and really the idea of like reducing decisions and like brain decisions. But really sensory rest is about, things like calm, quiet, like I said, turning off the TV or the noise or music. It's even for me, Jess, is in the mornings when I drive west to school once in a while, is I play classical music. So just kind of switching up a little bit in terms of having that quiet time and like that sensory rest.
Yeah. It might look like dimming lights or using lamps instead of overhead lighting. It's so funny. In our new kitchen, we have a lot of lighting. And I always come down in the morning and you can turn on just the 3 pendant lights or you can turn on all the lights. And I'll come downstairs and someone else in my family will be awake and have just the pendant lights on. And I immediately start like pushing all the light switches to have bright light. And then it is so interesting how we all have different sensory needs. And so for me, in my home in the kitchen, I like bright. I'm like, woohoo, we're waking up. And some people, right, like it to be dim light.
I like it to be dim. And
Yeah.
it was sometimes a running joke where like I have it all calm and quiet and dim enough in there. Like you said, I just have the pendant lights and that's it. And then Brian comes in and he turns all the lights on. And I'm like, no, I also like the idea of natural sunlight. I want to feel like I'm in the 80s and like I don't have actual electricity.
Your circadian rhythm is exclusively on the sun, on light and dark.
Yes. It's also about taking a phone-free walk, and that also can be an Apple Watch free walk too. We don't always have to have everything monitored with our wearables. The idea of like literally taking a walk without being connected to anything, because guess what, people? We did that even all of about 15 years ago, and we all came
Yeah.
back in one piece.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Sitting in silence for a few minutes, even in the car, reducing news or social media consumption. I know I've talked in other episodes.
mhm.
I'm on a news fast. And so that is helping me. And again, when we're talking about removing the guilt, we reframe this by saying sensory rest isn't isolation, it's regulation. And that brings us to our final idea for rest, which is creative rest. Thinking of play without pressure. Creative rest is reconnecting with play and curiosity without turning it into productivity or performance. So, what creative depletion might look like for you? Maybe you feel uninspired or stuck. Maybe hobbies have turned into projects, so you're not drawn to them. They're not fun anymore. Maybe you're avoiding creativity because it feels like work. Maybe you're losing joy in things you used to really enjoy.
And, creative rest, I'm excited to talk about this topic because I think this is fun. Again, we're trying to think about this as like rest beyond naps, people,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so it's thinking about creative rest could look like, maybe you're spending some time coloring or crafting or baking. These are rest. These count as rest, my friends.
Because we said rest might be doing something less, or it might be engaging in something nourishing.
Yep. And so I talked about this earlier. Again, I'm getting my lines blurred on these topics, but like really listening to music, listening to symphony music or classical stuff or just whatever music and just letting your mind wander. I love that. That
Yeah.
sounds so lovely.
And we've talked about this before, rearranging your space without needing it to be perfect, or just writing, doodling, or creating with no intention to share.
Or trying something new with zero expectations. When we think about creative rest, it isn't something about being productive or unproductive. Really, this is about fueling joy. So rest is truly about refueling yourself. And from a creative rest perspective, it's refueling your joy.
Yeah.
So, you don't need to practice all of these. Again, this is the idea of a menu of items and options to think about, and also just being aware of like those moments when you are, actively doing some of these different types of rest that you're telling yourself to me, which is like, I'm refueling myself and my body, and this is joy, or this is myself just sort of having a calm moment. Because the type of rest that you might resist the most might be the one that you need the most.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we said earlier, rest doesn't necessarily mean sleep, right? Sometimes it means less explaining, less deciding, less noise, and more play. And it is important that we carve out time for rest because, like we said, we're talking about nourishing and intentional rest.
Yeah. So, the thing is that when we start pushing ourselves and we start to experience burnout, and we just really, it's like you can't function anymore. You just can't go any further. Burnout doesn't usually come from one big thing. It comes from us never stopping and keep doing and doing and doing. And so we just keep telling ourselves a little longer for years. It's crazy how fast time goes by sometimes when we don't really kind of give ourselves what we need on rest.
Absolutely. And just like our last episode about resetting, we also want to offer you like a quick hard and fast rest menu with some ideas. We're going to give you ideas and then you choose 3 to 5 options and then hang it somewhere handy. It could be a Post-it note you put somewhere in your house, in your car. It can be a simple list on your phone, or you can get creative and, go to Canva and create a really fun graphic showing your menu.
I love this. I think this is actually really great to even think about with your family. A lot of times we're always all on, and just taking a moment, even with your kids and coaching them on just taking a minute of rest and even showing them what that could look like. I went through a lot of examples already, but, just to reiterate some of them, it could be sitting outside for a couple minutes, getting some sunshine, getting some fresh air, listening to nature. Maybe it's doing a task, even like folding laundry without sound, without a podcast, without audiobook, without anything, just sitting and doing something in a quiet, peaceful moment. This is about you guys, the whole idea too is really explore what fuels you. You might try some of these and it doesn't really hit right. Don't, maybe it just wasn't the right timing and you want to try something else. Just what ideas do you have?
You can go to bed earlier. You can say no to one non-essential thing. I love the idea of a no phone morning.
That's a good one.
I try not to be on my phone for the first 30 minutes I wake up. It can be one night a week with nothing scheduled.
But I think that being said, the night a week that you maybe don't have anything scheduled, don't fill it up. And maybe just take it as that moment. It was like, we don't have any kid activities tonight. Let's take this as like a moment that I can sort of use this as my rest. Maybe it's leaving an email unanswered until the next day. I love that. And I love the idea of some of these things, even when you have crucial conversations, that just sort of like letting it go till tomorrow. Sometimes it's just great. Again, they always say to sleep on stuff, right?
Yeah.
To kind of give your brain a break. So this is no pressure, no rules, just options and listening to yourself and what you feel is really what you need.
And we're talking a lot about reframing this season. And so instead of thinking I'm resting, think I'm restoring.
I love that, Jess.
Yeah, rest does give something back to us.
Or telling yourself rest isn't quitting, it's recalibrating, which is perfect in terms of how we are going through our days.
Yeah, and next week we'll talk about reconnecting with yourself first, because when you're rested, you can actually hear what you need.
Thank you so much for listening today. We can't wait to hear how some of these rest tactics work for you. Don't forget to read our blog. We dive in deeper to this topic. You can learn more about us. You can also sign up for our really awesome newsletter that comes out just once a month so we don't overwhelm your inbox. And you can find that at chasingbrighter.com.
If you want to see what we're loving, what we're learning, and how we're living a little brighter day by day, come hang out with us on social media at Chasing Brighter. Thanks for spending part of your day with us.